Today, many people take on the thrill of a safari, driving through the wilderness or open savanna in the hope of spotting one of the world's best wildlife is an adventure like no other. But what if you traveled back in time to the Pleistocene Epoch? What animals could you expect to see, and what would the scenery look like? Let's take a journey and hop inside our vehicle to travel around North America 2.6 million years ago. We start our safari on the open plains. The Pleistocene was characterized by a period of glacial and interglacial cycles, and the vegetation changed from largely forested areas to more open grasslands. This allowed for herbivores to thrive. As we drive across the grasslands, we spot possibly the most iconic of the Pleistocene species, the mammoth. There is a herd of them, about 15 individuals. We take a closer look. They are intermingled with American bison, a species that still graces the American plains today. But there is something else that is watching the mammoths from a distance, something downwind from the herd. It moves silently through the open grass, its eyes locked onto the smallest mammoth. There's another and another. It is a pride of Homotherium, a scimitar-toothed cat that likely hunted in groups. Fossil evidence suggests that this large cat was a social predator, and whilst some were adapted to hunting during daylight hours, others seem to have developed excellent night vision, making nocturnal hunting easier. We watch in silence as they stalk closer. Standing 3.6 feet, 1.1 meters at the shoulder, they crouch down to avoid detection. Their sloped back and powerful lumbar section were built for power and pulling heavy loads. Stealthily, they step forward, placing their muscular forelimbs silently on the ground, one in front of the other. When they close the gap between themselves and the young mammoth, they suddenly launch their attack, each of the big cats springing towards the herd. The matriarch of the mammoths, who is always on guard, trumpets, and the herd disperses. Pandemonium breaks out, and the mother of the baby mammoth tries to protect it. She wheels around, swinging her tusks from side to side, a display of size and power. But there are too many Homotherium. They surround the youngster, eventually separating it from its mother and pouncing on top of it together. The loss of the baby for the herd is a blow. It is assumed that mammoths had a gestation period similar to today's elephants, just under 22 months. With their slow rate of reproduction, it makes it difficult for a species to recover from significant population declines. But at their peak, populations of mammoths were large and plentiful. Hunting as a team means that Homotherium can take down the large prey. Whilst other big cats of the time, like the Smilodon, frequently snapped their long canines when tussling with large prey, Homotherium had shorter canines. This enabled them to use their teeth to drag prey to the ground. Once the baby mammoth is subdued, the pride of cats delivers fatal bites into its thick, tough hide. When the mammoth is still, the Homotherium starts to devour its prey. But they don't eat it then and there. During the Pleistocene in North America, there is a real threat from the likes of dire wolves and American lions. The smell of the fresh kill carries on the air. Living in the open grasslands of North America, the dire wolves roam in packs. They are capable of hunting large herbivores, led by an alpha pair to take down their prey. They have a preference for ruminants, such as bison, but they are also renowned scavengers. When they smell the deceased young mammoth, they close in. About the size of today's large gray wolves, they rely on the pack to take down larger animals. Their jaws are strong, but they cannot grab onto prey with their forelimbs in the same way Homotherium can. Instead, they bite down, injuring the animal until it succumbs to the multiple bite wounds. The Homotherium can sense the dire wolves approaching. They are numerous, and they know they need to drag away their kill if they want to have any chance of consuming it. Instead of eating the mammoth at the kill site, the Homotherium breaks up the body into manageable chunks, tearing flesh from bone and dragging it away to their lair, where they can eat in relative peace and away from hungry scavengers like the dire wolves. By now, the mammoths have run away from the attack site. They could have either been the Columbian mammoth or woolly mammoth, as both inhabited North America during the Pleistocene. But depending on where our safari is taking us, would depend on which species we were observing. The ancestors of both originated in Africa before migrating northwards and across Eurasia. Some thought to have evolved from the steppe mammoth and then made the journey across Beringia and into North America. The larger Columbian mammoths spread southwards and inhabited the temperate savannas to the south, whilst the smaller woolly mammoths were most suited to the cold steppes of the north. As we drive our vehicle away from the open grasslands and into the forests, we see yet another herd of large herbivores. They look distinctly like elephants, but they diverged from the ancestors of elephants at least 25 million years ago. They are a herd of mastodons, weighing up to 8 tons. These gentle giants enjoy feeding on woolly material such as tree bark and coniferous twigs. Their diet appears to be quite specialized, which prevented them from crossing into South America during the Great American Interchange due to the large open grasslands they would have to conquer to do so. As well as being typically browsers, they are also able to consume pumpkins, which are largely toxic to other animals. Owing to their large size, the mastodon can eat these fruits without any negative effects, spreading their seeds far and wide. Whilst marveling at these impressive giants, we notice that there is something that makes them look different from both mammoths and modern-day elephants. Although they tower above our vehicle, they aren't nearly as tall as their relatives. Instead, they look oddly stocky, with short, muscular legs. Their skulls are a different shape too, much longer than an elephant, but they still have long curved tusks like mammoths. The herd is comprised of females and their young. Once the males reach sexual maturity, they leave the herd and enter a life of solitude, only joining others to breed. The trail takes us through the forested region and back out into the open. This time there is a significant amount of water in the habitat. Marshes and swamplands are surrounded by lush grasses, and that's when we spot a familiar-looking creature. It is heavily armored and walks on all fours, but it is enormous. Measuring 2 meters or 6.5 feet long and weighing up to 400 kilograms or 880 pounds, it looks like a giant armadillo. It is in fact a Glyptotherium, an ancestor of today's armadillos. The shell that covers its entire body is made up of lots of hexagonal scales. Even its head is heavily armored, and there is very good reason for its heavy armor. There are plenty of predators in Pleistocene North America that would consider Glyptotherium a tasty meal. As the Glyptotherium chews on grasses and aquatic vegetation, living a life similar to today's pygmy hippos, a predator stalks closer. It is Borophagus, the bone-crushing dog. Its bulging forehead and incredibly powerful jaws allow it to chomp through bone, as well as the shell-like exterior of Glyptotherium. Originally, it was thought to be a scavenger and carrion feeder, owing to its ability to consume bone as well as flesh. But the wide geographical spread of this canid suggested that it was far more successful than that, and possibly even one of the dominant predators of its time. Now, a pack of them closes in on the unsuspecting Glyptotherium. Their speed and agility make them a formidable predator, and utilizing the whole of the carcass means that they can make full use of their kills. Although they are only 80 centimeters or 31 inches long, about the same size as a muscular coyote, they are able to take down the much larger Glyptotherium by working together as a pack. The predators run at the Glyptotherium, which in response turns and bares its clubbed tail. It thrashes it wildly from side to side. Being struck by the armored tail could cause serious damage, something that could be fatal out here in Pleistocene North America. The pack of Borophagus are cautious as they try to get a bite in. They leap backwards and out of the way of the tail, but after a little while they give up and leave the Glyptotherium alone. It's not worth the risk. Suddenly, we hear a loud screech above us. As we look up, we see an enormous bird. It's some kind of enormous condor and is called Teratornis. With a wingspan of almost 4 meters or 12.5 feet, it is a third bigger than today's condors. Its short legs mean that it cannot run along the ground to take off. Instead, it has to drop from cliffs to take flight. That's when we spot the distant cliffs the condor must have come from. As it flies overhead, we can see it beginning to circle in the sky. It must have spotted something of interest on the ground. We know that these giant condors ate small animals such as frogs, lizards, young birds, and small mammals which they swallowed whole. But they were also carrion feeders, Perhaps there is a fresh kill up ahead. We drive over to take a closer look. As we get closer to where the Teratornis are circling, we realize that the bone-crushing dog was in fierce competition with other predators across America. Beside a bison carcass is an enormous mammal. It is a bear. But this is different from modern brown bears or black bears. This individual is huge. During the Pleistocene, giant short-faced bears inhabited both North and South America. Arctotherium to the south and Arctodus to the north. It is thought to be the largest known terrestrial carnivore ever to have existed, and as we crawl to a stop, we can see why. It weighs up to 800 kilograms or 1,800 pounds, and as it tucks into the remains, it stands at 1.67 meters at the shoulder, or 5 feet 6 inches. When it sees us, it performs a threat display and stands on its hind legs, reaching a height of 3.4 meters or 11 feet. We back up. Like modern-day bears, Arctodus are incredibly protective of their food source. It was originally thought that these bears were largely herbivores, but even consuming vast quantities of vegetation wouldn't be enough to sustain an animal of this magnitude. They were considered slow and not agile. They likely would have overheated if they pursued prey over any great distance. Therefore, it is assumed that they fed on carrion. Evolution selected for larger size, which gave them an advantage at killing sites. This bear could face off against any other scavenger with ease. And just as well, because we spot an American lion approaching from the distance. It is obviously a lion, looking very similar to modern African lions, but it is clearly bigger, with more robust limbs. Rather than the yellowy beige fur color of the African lion, this one is more of a red color. It likely made the kill earlier and ate its fill. Now it's returning for more. It has a den inside a cave in the nearby cliffs, but it hunts on the open plains. This species prey on deer, horses, camels, tapirs, mammoths, and other large ungulates. But its preferred prey is definitely American bison. We wait to see the standoff between the two species that will soon become extinct, along with most of the megafauna we have witnessed during this safari towards the end of the Pleistocene. But the giant bear sees the lion off easily and continues devouring the remains of the bison, and we call it a day. Although this particular individual bison would never make it to see another day, its species will be one of the most successful in North America, surviving through the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary and into the present day. Today, taking a safari trip to South America may be rewarded with seeing marine iguanas in the Galapagos, sleepy sloths in Costa Rica, jaguars in Brazil's dense jungle, and vicuñas in the Atacama Desert. But if we traveled back in time 20,000 years to the peak of the last ice age, what could we expect to see? Let's take a look. As we drive through the South American landscape, the first thing that becomes obvious is that so many of the animals are enormous. Our guide tells us that around 20 different species weigh more than 500 kilograms, or 1,100 pounds. And the first animal we spot is one of the most iconic of the Pleistocene. This one sends shivers down our spines as we drive slowly across a large open plain. It is the Smilodon. Our guide slows the vehicle to a halt, and we all marvel at the animal that is now stalking across the plain. The grassland is dappled with snow. We had no idea that this saber-toothed cat was this big, but our guide informed us that it is the largest of the cats in Pleistocene South America, Smilodon populator. It could weigh more than 430 kilograms, or 960 pounds, and stood at 120 centimeters, or 47 inches tall. Its most common form of prey is Toxodon, something we're likely to see later on, the camel-like creature, Paleolama, the horse-like animal, Equus neohius, and the armadillo-like mammals. After a few minutes, we leave the Smilodon to it and drive off slowly. We head for a line of trees where our guide thinks we might see some more megafauna. He's not wrong. Just as we enter the sparse woodland, we see some animals in the distance. At first, they look like camels. These bodies are a similar shape, but they have no humps. And they have a neck and head a bit like a llama. They stand as tall as an adult man and weigh around 1 ton. Some are browsing from the trees and others are grazing the grasses. Our guide tells us that these are called macrochenia and are probably what the Smilodon is homing in on. He hands us a pair of binoculars and tells us to look at the macrochenia's heads. The strangest feature is their nostrils, which are situated on top of their heads, right between the eyes. As we move on, we see an animal we have all been hoping to see. This one is massive. It looks like a gentle giant. It is, of course, the giant ground sloth, also known as Megatherium. It is slow in its movements, and we watch whilst it eats leaves from the trees. There are 2 of them. One stands on its hind legs, using its muscular tail to support it, a bit like a tripod, whilst it reaches up and pulls down branches with its powerful front claws. They are known to walk on their 2 hind legs often, but usually walk on all 4s. As we continue past the feeding pair, we see a few more of these giants as they often stay in groups. The guide pauses as he thinks he sees another one emerging from behind a tree, but then he points. We realize that it isn't another giant sloth, but instead a glyptodon. These look like giant armadillos. They had short, stout legs and walked close to the ground, but they are most famous for their large, round carapace, an impressive suit of armor that makes it look a bit like a giant armadillo. This glyptodon is grazing the grass as it trots along. The guide tells us that they have a powerful tail for fighting others of their kind. The club-like tail of the Ankylosaurus dinosaur comes to mind, but this one isn't for fighting off predators. The glyptodon's incredibly strong armor protects them against those, as well as its bulkiness, weighing up to 2 tons. When we ask what kind of animals would eat a giant armadillo-like animal, the guide points beyond the trees to a cave on the hillside. He steers the vehicle towards the cave entrance, and then we sit and wait. We hear a noise coming from the darkness, and seconds later, a bear appears right before us. It is Arctotherium, a short-faced bear that migrated from North America into the South during the Great American Interchange. This was when the Panama Land Bridge formed, allowing species from North and South America to migrate into both continents. This particular short-faced bear isn't as big as we were expecting, but the guide says that some have been known to grow up to 4 meters, or 14 feet tall, and weigh more than 1.5 tons. We move on before the bear becomes protective of its cave, and find ourselves staring at a pack of dogs in the distance. They are moving swiftly across the open plain. They are the hypercarnivorous Protocyon. From a distance, they look like a pack of hyenas or wolves. They are the smallest animals we have seen yet, only about 30 kilograms or 66 pounds in weight, but they can take down some of the Mega-fauna by working together and hunting as a pack. They aren't the only canids to roam the South American lands throughout the Pleistocene. Theriodictis was also a wolf-like carnivore. The German shepherd-sized Ducicyon avu survived until around 400 years ago, and the more famous dire wolf was also hunted during Pleistocene South America. Surprisingly, the pack of Protocyon ran past a large animal that could have been considered prey. Once the carnivores have disappeared from sight, our guide drives us closer to the large animal. It has the body of a rhino and the head of a hippo. It is called the Toxodon and stands about 1.5 meters or 4 feet 11 inches at the shoulder and weighs around 1.5 tons. Something spooks it, and it takes off at an incredible speed. We turned around to see what the Toxodon was running from. Stalking throughout the grass is a jaguar, but this is twice the size of modern-day jaguars. It is known only by its scientific name, Panthera onca-mesembria. It weighs 230 kilograms, just over 500 pounds, and is one of the largest felids ever to have lived. The guide tells us that this large cat prefers to prey upon Mylodon ground sloths, a horse-like animal called Hippodion, and camelids. Maybe the Toxodon is safe after all. The guide drives us away from the area. We pass a herd of Paleolama, which look like a cross between a camel and a llama. Then we see some peccaries. They look just like modern-day wild hogs, but we are told that they are called Platygonus, and watch as they root around in the dirt. We cross over to a valley, where we pull up and observe another large animal. This one looks just like an elephant, and we are told that it is a notiomastodon, a type of gomphothere. It is similar in size to Asian elephants and lumbers along, pulling up grasses with its trunk and making its way to the rest of the herd. Our guide tells us that it is similar to the other elephant-like Pleistocene animal, Cuviaronius, but we can't see any of those in the valley. The notiomastodon weighs 3 to 4 tons and has long, impressive tusks. It's incredible to think these animals roamed South America not so long ago. Our journey is coming to an end. As we drive towards our drop-off point, we spot some tapir and pause to take a closer look. There were several species of tapir at the time, but it seems that this one is Tapirus mesopotamicus, thought to be the ancestor to all modern-day tapirs. We're surprised to hear that the tapirs, like their modern-day counterparts, prefer rainforest, savanna, or human tropical or subtropical forests near rivers. These habitats don't seem conducive to the ice age we are roaming through. As the sun begins to set and dusk sets in, something catches our eye overhead. There is a swarm of bats coming towards us. We are told that they are vampire bats, Desmodus draculae. They look just like today's vampire bats, only they are about 30% larger. In fact, it is the largest vampire bat ever known to have lived, with a wingspan of 50 centimeters or 20 inches. They have a huge range of animals to feed on. Our guide tells us that they rely on the Mega-fauna, diving down and landing on their back, piercing their skin and sucking their blood. We decide to call it a day. Pleistocene South America is a dangerous place to be at nighttime, with so many giants out on the hunt. It's sad to think that pretty much all of these animals will be extinct by the end of the Pleistocene, just 11,000 years before the modern day. A mixture of changing environments and habitats, as well as differences in vegetation, led to the demise of the herbivorous megafauna, which ultimately caused the carnivores of the time to become extinct. Early human settlers may have contributed to their demise too, which is reflected across the modern world as human activities and encroachment on wild habitats continues to deplete some of the world's most vulnerable species. Taking a safari in today's Australia would reward you with some incredible animals not found anywhere else on the planet. Driving around the driest inhabited continent on Earth, you would be able to enjoy croc-watching tours and observe the likes of kangaroos, koalas, emus, and cassowaries. But what if we were able to take a step back in time to the Pleistocene era? Spanning from 2.5 million years ago to 11,700 years ago, Australia was a different place, with some even more unusual inhabitants. Let's take a look and see what we could expect to see on a safari in Pleistocene Australia. As we jump in our 4x4 vehicle and head off on our safari across Pleistocene Australia, we keep our eyes peeled. Australia is already in the geographical position it is in today. The flora and fauna are remarkably similar to today, but there are plenty of surprises along our journey. We turn the vehicle towards a distant woodland where we hope to see some animals. As we enter the trees, the driver brings the 4x4 to a halt. He spotted something. In the scruffy bush, there is some movement. A bristly-looking body emerges from near the ground. It looks like it's completely covered in spines. It's a bit like a hedgehog. We soon realize that this is no hedgehog. Instead, it's an echidna. These egg-laying mammals are common throughout Australia in modern times. But this one is different. It looks very similar to today's short-beaked echidna, but it is enormous. Our guide informs us that during our Pleistocene safari, we are likely to find what was known as the Mega-fauna animals that were significantly larger than today's species. This echidna is called the Hackett's giant echidna and measures 1 meter or 3.3 feet long and can weigh up to 30 kilograms or 66 pounds. We can see that she looks anxious and agitated. She dives under her underground burrow and comes out with her newborn baby. It's called a puggle and is completely spineless and defenseless. She then scurries off into the woodland, taking her puggle with her. When we look around to try and find out the reason for her fleeing, we see an enormous snake. It must be at least 6 meters or 20 feet long. It's called Wanambi, and rather than being venomous, it is a constrictor, similar to pythons. It is also an ambush predator, but it has been detected by the giant echidna. The game is up. Or is it? The snake is too large to sneak down the echidna's burrow, like modern-day snakes. Maybe the echidna and her young weren't the target of this large snake. We watch in silence as the snake slithers along the ground. It moves towards a large watering hole. There, it lies in wait. We move the vehicle closer, watching and waiting. The snake is hoping to ambush something. Just then, an animal moves towards the water. It's a kangaroo, although nothing like we have ever seen before. This is a kangaroo of giant proportions. It must be standing at least 2 meters, or 6.6 feet tall. It has a shorter face than today's kangaroos, and 2 extra long fingers on each of its front feet. Its name is Pleistocene, and it is the largest kangaroo ever to have existed. We watch as it pulls branches down from the trees with its long fingers and nibbles at the leaves. Then, slowly, it makes its way to the water to drink. It's now dangerously close to the lurking Wanambi snake. But as it lowers its head to drink, something spooks it. The giant kangaroo pricks its ears and sniffs the air. It then takes off into the undergrowth. We are surprised to see it walking, more like a human rather than hopping like modern-day kangaroos. But weighing up to 240 kilograms, or 530 pounds, the tendons in the back legs simply wouldn't be able to cope with that sort of locomotion. There would be too much stress and strain caused by hopping. Out of the woodland comes an enormous creature. It's not like anything we've seen before. It has a snout a bit like a hippo, and a body like a rhino, with huge muscular shoulders. We sit in silence as it ambles out of the tree line. Now in full view, we can see just how enormous it is. Standing at 1.8 meters, or 5 feet 11 inches at the shoulder, and measuring 3.4 meters, or 11 feet from head to tail, we are informed that it is Diprotodon, the largest marsupial ever to have existed. It looks like a giant wombat. Being so large, this animal has shaped the landscape in which it lives, much like modern-day elephants. It feeds on trees, grasses, and shrubs, consuming vast quantities to fuel its body. It is too large for the Wanambi snake to take down, and so the snake gives up and slithers away. But the danger isn't over for the Diprotodon. As it gulps down water from the watering hole, a marsupial lion is closing in. Similar in weight to today's African lionesses, the marsupial lion stalks through the undergrowth, its belly close to the ground. It's been searching for a meal, and now it has found one. But the Diprotodon looks too big for the lion to take down. They are more suited to tackling the juveniles. As it lunges forward from the undergrowth, the Diprotodon turns at the last second. There is a face-off, and we don't know who is going to come out on top. A moment later, the marsupial lion scarpers. Perhaps it realized that it wouldn't be able to subdue such large prey. But then, we see another predator is approaching. One that is truly terrifying, and one that the Diprotodon is no match for. The Diprotodon backs away nervously as a scaly head pokes out from the trees. It sways gently from side to side as it moves forward. The head belongs to some kind of reptile, a giant reptile. And although saltwater crocodiles existed during the Pleistocene and made for formidable predators, this animal is even larger than a salty. It reminds us of a giant Komodo dragon. But even this enormous lizard would dwarf today's Komodo dragons. Its name is Mega-fauna and is the largest terrestrial lizard known to have existed. It likely competed with marsupial lions for prey. When it comes into full view, we can see that it is 7 meters, or 23 feet long, and estimated to weigh almost 2,000 kilograms, or 4,400 pounds. Once it is within a few yards of the Diprotodon, it suddenly lunges forwards. It catches the giant marsupial in its jaws, and we hear an ear-splitting shriek from the Diprotodon as it struggles to break free. There is a brutal tussle between mammal and reptile, but we can see the Diprotodon growing weaker as the seconds pass. We can't tell if the Mega-fauna has venom glands inside its mouth. It doesn't take long for the Diprotodon to succumb to the attack, allowing the lizard to tuck into its meal. We suspect that venom helped in subduing the prey, mostly by acting as an anticoagulant, increasing blood loss, and rapidly reducing blood pressure just like the venom of Komodo dragons. If the Mega-fauna did secrete venom, then it would make it the largest venomous vertebrate ever known. We watch for a few minutes as the lizard tears meat from the bone and then heads off. As we travel back into the open, we see a flock of large birds walking along the ground. We are familiar with the large flightless birds that are endemic to Australia in modern times, such as the emu and cassowary, and these birds are similar in size. They look a bit like ostriches and are now called Newton's thunderbirds. Although they are an impressive sight, they are not as big as the earlier thunderbirds that once graced the Australian outback. We carry on driving past, viewing all sorts of wildlife that looks remarkably familiar. There are different species of kangaroos, all different shapes and sizes. Even scuttling along the riverbank we drive along, we see a platypus. It is slightly larger than today's duck-billed platypus, but other than size, is very similar. It is sad to think many of these animals no longer exist, but of course, some of their relatives managed to make it past the end of the Pleistocene and survive the influx of man. Up in one of the trees, clinging to the trunk, we spot a koala bear. We've never seen one before, but our guide informs us that this is about 1/3 larger than modern-day koalas. It is known as the giant koala and spends most of its time in the trees, but soon will become extinct, like much of the Australian Mega-fauna. As our safari draws to a close, we see a sad sight. In the distance, trotting along the open grassland, is a Tasmanian tiger or Tasmanian wolf. This canid, similar to modern dogs or foxes, was alive until as recently as 1936, but we as humans never managed to conserve the species. It is incredible to see this iconic species. Once considered an apex predator just a short distance away, their demise would come later than the other members of the Australian megafauna, as dingoes, introduced by man, outcompeted them, and humans hunted them to extinction. Only a few lone specimens remained in zoos until the 20th century, until they too died. Of course, Australia is famed for many of its modern-day species like its crocodiles, monotremes, and marsupials. But having survived the Pleistocene megafaunal extinction, how much longer will these animals remain in Australia? If you took a step back, what could you expect to see on a safari in Pleistocene Eurasia? Some animals would be familiar and wouldn't look entirely out of place. For example, wolves were much more widespread across Eurasia during the Pleistocene, and animals like bears were also common, although these would likely have been cave bears. Similar in appearance to today's brown bears, the cave bears had a stout body and a broad, domed skull. They ate more of an herbivorous diet than European brown bears, but there is evidence on carcasses that they scavenged meat occasionally. They inhabited forested terrain, living in limestone caves. They appeared to adapt to the fluctuating climate of the Pleistocene, becoming larger during the glacial periods and smaller during interglacials, a way of adjusting heat loss to the changing conditions. Competition with humans for resources may have led to the cave bear's extinction 24,000 years ago. The European dhole, a relative of today's dhole, a canid, lived during Pleistocene Europe and Asia. It was larger than today's species, similar in size to a gray wolf. However, whilst the wolf grew larger during the Pleistocene, the dhole grew smaller so that there was less competition. They hunted in forests, across highlands, and on mountains. The giant short-faced hyena became one of the most dominant and successful predators of Pleistocene Europe. Similar in size to a lioness, it was the largest known hyena to have lived until its extinction 500,000 years ago. Despite their success throughout the continent, there is little fossil evidence of them after the early to middle Pleistocene. They dispersed out of Africa around 2 million years ago, but were replaced by the more successful and adaptable spotted hyena, a known species throughout sub-Saharan Africa today. But the giant short-faced hyena wasn't the only hyena to inhabit Eurasia all those years ago. Perhaps more famous was the cave hyena. This was a subspecies of the spotted hyena. It was more robust and had a thicker frame than its modern-day equivalents. It adapted to its diet according to the climate, becoming a more active hunter during glacial periods when regular calorie-dense food was essential for survival. They would have taken down wild horses, steppe bison, and woolly rhinos, to name a few. But there is also evidence that they stole kills from Neanderthals, living up to the scavenging reputation their descendants would develop. Their size also changed in response to the environment. During the glacial periods, they were generally larger, but when the ice receded, they became smaller in body size.
They dominated during the Middle to Late Pleistocene, becoming widespread from Europe to Southeast Asia. Early humans wouldn't have only had to avoid predation by the likes of hyenas, but also cave lions and the scimitar-toothed cat, Homotherium. These two predators would have competed for food across Pleistocene Eurasia. Homotherium was smaller than the lion, with a smaller body mass and front paw muscle strength. They also had reduced claws, all of which meant they couldn't take down large prey like the lions. They hunted better in open habitats, but could have been pushed out by the more dominant lions. As well as the cave lion, modern lions, or Panthera leo, also inhabited parts of southern Europe during the Pleistocene, adding yet another predator to the mix. Twice the size of today's cheetahs was the giant cheetah. It spanned western Europe to China, living from the Pliocene to the Middle Pleistocene. Some suggest that these cats lived like modern cheetahs, hunting down their prey and suffocating them before tucking into the carcass. Others have suggested that they hunted more like pantherine cats, attacking from behind and killing prey with a single bite to the back of the neck. Straight-tusked elephants wandered in herds throughout Western Asia and Europe, dying out around 300,000 years ago. They were the largest known proboscideans, with males reaching a shoulder height of just over 4 meters or 14 feet and weighing up to 15 tons. During interglacial periods when the ice retreated, their northern range was extended as far north as Great Britain. They possessed a large crest on the top of their head to hold the weight of the head, which was thought to be the largest amongst all elephants. Their social structures were thought to have been similar to today's elephants, living in matriarchal herds, and adult males largely living a life of solitude. During the wetter months, they grazed grasses, and during the drier seasons, they mostly browsed trees, shrubs, and bushes. It is believed that these giants were both hunted and scavenged by early humans as well as Neanderthals. Their demise is likely due to unfavorable climatic conditions, which occurred around 115,000 years ago, rather than overhunting by humans. Scientists believe their loss from the landscape severely impacted the biodiversity across Europe. Like modern elephants, they were a keystone species, their very existence impacting the lives of many other species and shaping the ecosystem in which they lived. Interestingly, although the straight-tusked elephants were enormous, their descendants were the dwarf elephants that inhabited many of the Mediterranean islands. Other giants seen throughout Eurasia during the Pleistocene were the mastodons. These diverged from the lineage that became modern-day elephants 25 million years ago. They were typically browsers, consuming spruce needles, pine cones, grass, and vine leaves. Although they are often depicted as being hairy, there is little scientific evidence of this. Whilst they were not much taller than modern elephants, they were considerably bigger in terms of weight and robustness, weighing up to 10 tons. They became extinct in Eurasia by the beginning of the Pleistocene, but the American mastodon survived much later. The woolly rhino, perhaps less well known than the woolly mammoth, was hunted by early humans across Eurasia. Their bodies were covered in long, thick fur to help them survive the icy cold of the frozen steppe. Due to their size, the woolly rhinos had few predators, but youngsters could be taken by cave lions and hyenas. They mostly grazed grasses and sedges, living mainly in the lowlands and along plateaus. They became extinct from Europe around 15,000 years ago, but a small population survived in Siberia for another 1,000 years. As the climate warmed and precipitation increased, the grasses and sedges of the lowlands were largely replaced by shrubs and bushes, reducing the woolly rhino's diet. Climate change fragmented the populations, ultimately leading to their demise. But they weren't the only rhino species that would have been spotted on a Pleistocene safari. The interglacial rhinoceros genus Stephanorinus was a two-horned rhino roaming much of Eurasia, particularly continental Europe. They were also native to North Africa. There were two species, Merck's rhinoceros and the narrow-nosed rhinoceros. They weighed between 1.5 and 3 tons, and the species adapted to the habitats available to them during the Pleistocene. The species alternated between browsing and grazing, giving them more flexibility when climate change altered the vegetation available. With tusks up to 15 feet long, the woolly mammoths were probably the most iconic species of the Pleistocene. Their genus first appeared in Africa around 5 million years ago. Before they dispersed into Eurasia, they thrived during the ice ages of the Pleistocene. But as the era came to an end and the climate warmed, their numbers began to decline. Entering the Holocene, their remaining numbers were hunted by humans, and they became extinct in Eurasia. A small population remained on Wrangel Island until 4,000 to 2,000 years ago before being hunted to extinction. Amazingly, Eurasia was also once home to hippos, which dispersed from Africa around 6 million years ago. They were Hippopotamus antiquus, a different species from today's African hippos, and about twice the size. They mostly ate aquatic plants, unlike their modern counterparts who primarily grazed terrestrial grasses. They disappeared from Europe during the Middle Pleistocene. One prey species that was found throughout Eurasia from Ireland to Siberia was the giant deer, or Megaloceros giganteus. Some scientists believe that these giant deer succumbed to starvation during the most recent ice age, but their fossils in Siberia have been dated back to just 7,000 years ago, long past the ice age. An aquatic animal found in Europe, specifically Sardinia, was Megalonhydrus, a giant otter. Some scientists say that it was 10 feet long, and it has been depicted killing a hammerhead shark. However, although the tail was flattened somewhat to power it through the water at considerable speed, it likely ate crustaceans and bottom-dwelling fish, owing to its adapted claws. Although the woolly mammoth survived until relatively recently, and the descendants of many animals from the Pleistocene are still alive today, another species that is now extinct made it into modern times. Sandwiched between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea around modern-day Georgia is an isthmus of land known as the Caucasus. Once the Caspian tiger roamed this land. This tiger's fur was brighter in appearance than Siberian tigers with narrower black stripes. Wild pigs, deer, mountain sheep, onagers, and wild horses would have formed the bulk of their diet. It was thought to have been connected to the Bengal tiger population during the Pleistocene, but as the world entered the Holocene, despite surviving the changing climate, it was humans who hunted them to extinction and destroyed their habitats to make way for agriculture. They survived in the region until modern times with various sightings as recently as the 1950s, and even one claim of a female with cubs in Kazakhstan in 2006.
The African continent has always been a land of wonder and adventure. From the vast savannas to the dense jungles, Africa has a rich history and diverse wildlife that fascinates people to this day. However, we often forget that the Africa we see today is vastly different from what it was during the Pleistocene Epoch. Just imagine what it would have been like to go on a safari through Africa during that time, when the climate, geography, and wildlife were entirely different from what we know today. Embarking on a safari through Africa during the Pleistocene Epoch would have been a fascinating and unforgettable experience, offering glimpses into the diversity of life that inhabited the continent. The ecosystem of the African continent was vast and varied, with different habitats supporting an array of species ranging from small rodents and insects to giant predators and herbivores. As you journey through the grasslands, you would come across vast herds of herbivores such as the massive Deinotherium. Deinotherium, an extinct genus of proboscideans, lived during the Middle Miocene to early Pleistocene epochs and was one of the largest land animals that ever lived. Despite their elephant-like appearance, they had unique feathers that set them apart from modern-day elephants. One of the most notable differences between Deinotherium and modern elephants is the former's highly flexible neck. While elephants have relatively rigid necks, Deinotherium had a more versatile neck that allowed it to move its head in different directions with ease. This adaptability is reflected in their name, which comes from the Greek words dinos, meaning terrible or strange, and therion, meaning beast. Another major distinction between Deinotherium and elephants is the position of their tusks. Unlike modern elephants, whose tusks emerge from the maxilla or upper jaw, Deinotherium's tusks curved downward and backward from the mandible or lower jaw. The tusks were quite long and could reach up to 4 meters in length, making them the longest of any land animal. Researchers believe that they might have used their tusks to strip the bark off trees, dig up roots, or defend against predators. Deinotherium also had limbs that were adapted to a more cursorial lifestyle. Their long, slender limbs and elongated metapodials, the bones that extend from the ankle to the toes, suggest that they were capable of running at relatively high speeds. This adaptation may have been useful for avoiding predators or for covering large distances in search of food and water. Pelorivus is a type of African wild cattle that no longer exists. It first appeared during the Pleistocene period, which was approximately 2.5 million years ago, but then became extinct at the end of the late Pleistocene period, around 12,000 years ago. Pelorivus had a similar appearance to the African buffalo, but was larger in size and had longer curved horns. The estimated weight of Pelorivus was around 1,200 kilograms, with the largest males weighing up to 2,000 kilograms, making it one of the largest bovines that ever lived. Metridichosaurus, also known as the giant warthog, was a genus of pig that existed during the Pliocene and Pleistocene periods in Africa, but is now extinct. This species was sizable, with a length of 1.5 meters or 4.9 feet, and had a similar appearance to a giant warthog. Its defining characteristic was its two large pairs of tusks that pointed sideways and curved upward. The creature's molars had a complex and knobby pattern, indicating that Metridichosaurus was an omnivore, meaning it had a diet that included both plant and animal matter. Hippopotamus gorgops was a fascinating species of hippopotamus that existed in Africa during the late Miocene period and eventually spread to Europe during the early Pliocene period. Its fossils were first discovered in Europe and provide significant insight into its physical characteristics and unique features. Compared to its living relatives, Hippopotamus gorgops was much larger, with a length of 4.3 meters, a shoulder height of 2.1 meters, and a weight of 3,900 kilograms. Its large size may have been a result of the abundant vegetation available to it, which provided an ample food source. One of the most remarkable features that set Hippopotamus gorgops apart from modern hippos was the placement of its eyes. While modern hippos have eyes positioned high on their skulls, Hippopotamus gorgops had orbits that protruded above its skull. This unique feature would have allowed the creature to have even better visibility while submerged underwater, which would have been particularly beneficial as it spent much of its time in the water. Another characteristic that made Hippopotamus gorgops distinctive was its large and impressive tusks. These were not only important for defense, but also played a crucial role in the animal's survival, particularly when fighting over territory, resources, or mating rights. Its powerful jaws and sharp teeth, along with its impressive size, would have made it a formidable force in its ecosystem. Therapithecus brumti was a large and impressive species of terrestrial monkey that existed during the mid to late Pliocene period. This species, which is now extinct, belonged to the Papianin group of primates. Fossil remains of Therapithecus brumti are primarily known from skulls and mandibles that have been found in Pliocene deposits at the Amo River, Ethiopia, in the Shangara Formation. Like many other primates, Therapithecus brumti was quadrupedal and had highly dexterous, manipulative hands. This would have allowed it to climb trees, gather food, and interact with its environment in a variety of ways. However, what made this species particularly noteworthy was its size, especially among males. For example, a specimen found at Lamqui, Kenya, was estimated to have weighed approximately 43.8 kilograms. This suggests that male Therapithecus brumti was among the largest primates of their time. Crocodilus thorbjarnarsoni is an extinct species of crocodile from the Pliocene and Pleistocene eras of the Turkana Basin in Kenya. It could be the largest known true crocodile, with the largest skull found indicating a possible total length of up to 7.6 meters. Crocodilus thorbjarnarsoni was named by Christopher Broku and Glenn Storrs in 2012 in honor of John Thorbjarnarson, a conservationist who worked to protect endangered crocodilians. Homotherium, an extinct genus of the Machaerodontini saber-toothed predator, was a remarkable and unusual creature. One of the most striking features of this prehistoric cat was the marked imbalance between its front and hind legs. With its long front limbs and squat hind limbs, Homotherium had a body shape more akin to a modern hyena, an animal with which it likely shared the habit of hunting in packs. Often called a scimitar cat due to the shape of its teeth, Homotherium was a formidable hunter capable of taking down prey as diverse as early Homo sapiens and woolly mammoths. While the exact hunting methods of Homotherium are still a subject of debate among scientists, it is believed that the species may have hunted in packs, taking down large herbivores like bison and horses through coordinated ambushes. In addition to its impressive hunting abilities, Homotherium had several adaptations that allowed it to thrive in its environment, including powerful jaws, strong forelimbs, and a highly efficient respiratory system. Dinofelis is often called a false saber-toothed cat because while its front canines are enlarged beyond a point normally seen in today's big cats, they were not as large as the true saber-toothed cats, whereas Smilodon is, without doubt, the most famous prehistoric big cat. Dinofelis is the most notorious. This notoriety comes from the long association of Dinofelis hunting and eating early hominids like Homo habilis, Paranthropus, and Australopithecus afarensis, thought by some to be an ancestor of modern humans. This predation reveals that Dinofelis was active in Africa, but the various species attributed to the genus are wide-ranging, which remains to be found across Eurasia and as far north as North America. Agriotherium, a well-known genus of bears in the fossil record, is renowned for its impressive size. Among the largest bears currently known, Agriotherium could reach up to 2.7 meters, or 9 feet, in body length and weigh approximately 900 kilograms, or 1,980 pounds. Unlike other bears, Agriotherium had longer legs and shorter faces, which made them more lightly built. Their wide, short jaws were capable of generating immense bite force, adding to their fearsome reputation as predators. So, while the fauna of Africa today is breathtaking, a lot has changed since the Pleistocene. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment with what you would like to see in the following videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.